Next, I'd like to give the podium to Congressman Brad Sherman, Democrat of California. Congressman Sherman is the senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Subcommittee on Terrorism and Nonproliferation and Trade, and a member of the Iran Human Rights and Democracy Caucus. Welcome, Congressman Sherman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best-named city, Sherman Oaks. It is a pleasure to be with you again, as I've been again and again and again, and some of you have heard that line about Sherman Oaks dozens and dozens of times over the years. With me today is Kinsey Kyriakos. Please give him your card or your email address if you want to be kept up to date on what I'm doing in Congress on the issues we're talking about here today. I was looking at one of my old speeches, and I realized that I had only been in Congress a few months back in 1997 when I went before my colleagues and said the #1 threat to America's national security is Iran's nuclear program. Now, in 1997, they thought I was crazy. They thought I was obsessed. I am obsessed about stopping Iran's mischief in the world and the nuclear program that it wants to support it. Now, I want to especially thank the MEK and other organizations dedicated to a new government in Iran. I had the opportunity just last month to appear, albeit by video. I would have liked to have been in Paris in person, at the International Conference for Democracy in Iran. I had a chance at that time to thank the MEK for being the first organization to expose Iran's then-secret nuclear program. And I took the opportunity to thank Madam Rajavi for her dedication to women's rights in the Middle East. Now, in Iraq, we see a government that continues to exist because we saved them. ISIS was on the outskirts of Baghdad, and we saved them. They shouldn't count on us until they start meeting their international human rights responsibilities with regard to Camp Liberty and the few still in Camp Ashraf. As to this nuclear deal, the various legal elements are complicated, not just the deal, that's the easy part, but American law and American sanctions law and the provisions of what if Congress does this, what are the powers of the president, and what do we do if he oversteps those powers. But I was the first Democrat to declare that I will not vote to approve this deal. Because we need to make sure that in international law, people realize this is not a treaty, this is not an executive legislative agreement, this is the lowest level of temporary handshake. It's not binding on Iran, and even if it was, they wouldn't feel bound by it, and it's not legally binding on the United States, and we can never see an unlimited number of centrifuges of unlimited quality creating a huge industrial effort to make enriched uranium every day. What people need to focus on is that once they, some of the 10-year, 11-year restrictions require, even if they obey the deal, and I know there are some in the room who don't think they're going to obey it, but God, what if they do obey it? It could happen, maybe. They are allowed to have an unlimited number of centrifuges of unlimited quality, and they have a perfect excuse for it. because if you want to create enough enriched uranium to light a couple of cities, that is the cover to have enough centrifuges to create a bomb every day. You need a lot more uranium to power a city than to blow one up. It's an unfortunate fact of physics. So we cannot get to that day. We need to make it clear this deal is not binding on, on future American presidents or future American Congresses. But most important, just because Iran enters into a flawed nuclear deal with the United States does not mean that we can turn a blind eye to their other activities around the world. A country that executes a person inside their country every 2 hours, and not a single one of those executions is a result of due process and a determination of guilt of a capital crime, and a whole lot of those executions are for political activity or the slightest or allegations of adultery. If you stoned everyone in the United States Congress who was guilty of adultery, I'm not going to go beyond that, it would diminish attendance. But it's not just what Iran does within its own borders. You have the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. You have a regime that is joined at the hip with Assad in killing over 200,000 people. You have the Houthi in Yemen, and you have 4 American hostages. So that's why the day after we deal with this nuclear deal, I will be proposing legislation to deal with Iran's non-nuclear activities and say whether their nuclear activities, we cannot provide civil aviation to a country that is using planes to take thugs and weapons to Damascus. We cannot allow imports to the United States from the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. We cannot allow countries to do banking with the United States if they are massively increasing their imports of oil from Iran. We should take a look at countries' involvement in the Iranian auto sector before we allow access to the American auto market. Everything is on the table, and if some of the sanctions are the same sanctions that Iran thinks it's entitled to us waiving, well, they're no longer nuclear sanctions. They're sanctions because they're the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. They're sanctions because they're killing tens of thousands of people every few months in Syria. They're sanctions because they've got one of the worst human rights records in the world. And when they deal with all that, I'll be here to celebrate with you, and we can repeal all the sanctions laws. Deal or no deal, America and sanctions are not going away. Thank you very much.